What is React? At this point, you've already been working with React and you've even used it to make a mini app. I think now's a good time to take a brief step back and explain what React is, why it was created, and talk about some of the core concepts behind it. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this section. React was created by Facebook, I believe initially for use in building the chat feature on their website. Unlike its major rival, Angular, which is a fully blown MVC framework, React is simply a Vue library, which is basically the V in MVC. This means that React is purely responsible for the visible user interface, nothing else. It has no functionality for application-wide state management, routing, HTTP requests, or any of the other functionality which is required for a single-page web app, but which is not counted as being part of the view. For functionality we require which is beyond the scope of React, we can use other modules. This was a very deliberate design decision on the part of React's creators. It does one thing, and it does it very well, then allows developers to pick and choose other modules to build the ecosystem for their application. As I see it, React was built to solve the following web UI development problems. UI code used to be very hard to test. UI code also quickly became hard to manage as it scaled. These two issues are very closely linked, and it was mainly because in the past UI code hasn't been very componentized and it's been very entangled within the browser's DOM. Browser differences once upon a time made UI development very tough. This isn't such a big issue now actually, as browsers are better developed and are closer to feature parity in terms of their JavaScript capabilities. Browsers were never initially designed to sort of deliver applications. They aren't really built for fast, dynamic, responsive UIs. So modern UIs are faced with performance issues. The core thinking behind React is that user interfaces can be split into components. Think of a component as being a building block of the UI, something that does a very specific thing. For example, a navigation component or a search result component. Components can then be combined together to create bigger components, and those bigger components can be combined with other components to create even bigger components still. And in this way, our entire application is composed of components. A given instance of a component will have data passed to it. That data and the logic in the component itself will determine what the component displays. The data can change dynamically, and when it does, what the component displays will update to reflect these changes to the data. This means that a React-based UI can be said to react to changes in your application's data, hence the name, and the UI will always be a visual representation of the data in your application. Components are good for the following reasons. Testability. Components enable testability, as it's far easier to write tests for one small component at a time than for a whole UI. It's also easier to test React components compared to something like, say, jQuery, as React components do not rely on the DOM or any global state. Reusability. Once written, components can be reused again and again, either within one project or even extracted into a component library and used in other people's projects. Scalability. UI projects can quickly become unwieldy as they get larger. Components give developers a logical way of breaking the UI down into smaller pieces, so development is easier to manage as the codebase scales in size. We will go into more detail about components in later sections of the course, as you will be using them a lot. In the following lectures in this section, you will be learning about JSX, a JavaScript extension which allows you to create React components by adding XML directly into your JavaScript code, and about the efficient, cross-browser compatible way in which React goes about rendering your UI in the browser.